Welcome everyone to the Q&A of Black Ignorance is a Billion-Dollar Industry. I am your host, Emmanuel Kulu of the Culture Show. My co-host Shay is not able to be with us today, but we're going to be discussing this Q&A. I have a lot of questions in regards to Black um, Black ignorance is a billion-dollar industry. First and foremost, I want to give a shout out to the ARC of Erie County for sponsoring my TEDx talk. I think it went very well in Houston. I look forward to seeing the full edit. Shout out to Brother Addy and also shout out to Netta Jenkins who plugged me with TEDx. I mean, it was a great experience. I wish that there was more that I can share, but at the moment, right now, the title of the talk is "Untold: The Golden Age of Africa." So be looking out for that TEDx talk from yours truly, Emmanuel Kulu. Um, so so just kicking things off with our first day's Q&A. So I've been asked this question very frequently. Did Africans sell other Africans into slavery, or were they sold? Well, this is one of those questions, answers where I'm going to have to say a little bit of both. Okay. Um, when people think of this, you need to see it from the context that African people don't see themselves, historically, didn't see themselves as a global diasporic community of Africans. They were all separate tribes. So, at a time period, there were many Africans who were being stolen from Africa by different Europeans, and then Africans began to fight back. And then others, as trade routes were cut off after the Roman and the Greek expansion, and many Europeans did not want to go into um, the Arab nations because they were battling with the Arabs at that time. They decided to take routes around Africa. So a lot of trade routes into the Middle East were kind of cut off based off of these conflicts between Europe and the Middle East at that time. So Africans began to conflict with each other. And as these conflicts went on, there were there was what you call servitude. And one nation would conquer another nation, and the nation that was conquered would go into a form of servitude. So this is absolutely something that happened. And as business came to certain shores of Africa, they many African kingdoms, as we know, participated in the transatlantic slave trade. Now, when you think about this, don't think about this from the diasporic point. Think about this from tribes. They were selling basically people that they had conquered. Did they possibly know the horror stories that would happen to these people as they were sold into American slavery? Probably not. They probably didn't know those things particularly, but did they participate? Specifically, the Dahomey Amazon women, did they participate? Absolutely, they did. And I know since the Woman King story has come out, a lot of people have been asking that question. Are we glorifying these women who partook in the transatlantic slave trade? I know that there's many sides to the story, but the facts are that the Dahomey Amazons did participate, and the Kingdom of Benin did participate in the transatlantic slave trade. So there, that information is. But I need everyone to understand this from a different point of view. There are many tribes right here in America. You have your African Americans who choose to be educated and go get a college degree. You have your African Americans who are entrepreneurs. You have your African Americans who are in the sports, basketball, football, fraternities, sororities, religion, Christian, Islam. These are all tribes. This is kind of how like Africa was. and it still is to this very day, actually. There are many different tribes of people, okay? And your tribe of people is the people who you are like minded with. So if someone's not like minded with you, they're kind of considered the enemy. So this is how the transatlantic slave trade took place, with the same mentality that these people that we're conquering are not our people. So when we hear the term that Africans sold their brethren, continental brethren, yes. Tribal brethren, no. So I think we need to understand that from a contextual, from putting this in its context. And it's very difficult as you travel to the continent. You can't just say a Cameroonian and a Congolese person are the same because they're culturally different. Even though they both have black skin, that construct is a Western construct from America. So when we put that into an American context, sometimes we think people sold their own brethren, so to speak, but these were two different tribes selling themselves, selling their enemies, so to speak. Um, my next question: the music industry. How is it affecting the minds of Black youth to this very day? Well, okay. The hip hop industry is obviously a billion-dollar business, which is part of this Q&A. Black ignorance is a billion-dollar industry, which I'm going to discuss this right now. Absolutely. When these artists are approached, they're approached from the perspective of they're young, they're influencers. They have the swag of the young boys that are listening to them. They know the lingo of these young boys, but their integrity is also compromised because they have not yet developed their morale and their integrity just yet. So when a record label comes to an 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19-year old, 20, 21, 22, 23-year old, these are young men who have not developed who they're going to be in their 30s and 40s just yet. They haven't developed yet a conscious of the greater good. So these are the artists that are selected to rap about things that most of us consider to be very negative, very over sexualized, violence, drug dealing, all of these things. Now you're talking to somebody who was a hip hop artist. Um, and I understand what it's like to be a young man and to have your vigor and to have the ability to express your dominance over a hip hop beat. It's almost like sports, hip hop, and art is a way for Black people to freely express their dominance. And this is why you have so many young Black men running through those three gates, because it's a way to be the dominant force that you normally are in these three lanes: hip hop, sports, and art expression, film as well. So this is why we see a lot of young Black men running through that door. The problem they run into is this: there's no council of elders of the people who came before you. Your LL Cool J's, your Rakim's, your Chuck D's, your Cool Hercs, your legends, your Tupac Shakur's who's passed on, you know these guys, your DMX's. There's no board to educate the youth on the history of hip hop. What was the essence of it? What is the how did it come about? The actual knowledge of how it came about. There's a lot of discrepancy about that as well. So those things are not known to today's era of hip hop artists. So they don't have that understanding of the essence of it. So they're kind of just doing what they see is kind of popular, and they're running with it. Okay, so there's another mixed connection right there. So people are profiting off of these young men, the ignorance of these young men, preaching about all of these different horrific things: violence, killing your own, slapping women, beating women, sleeping from women, from this woman to that woman. And it's really corrupting the minds of our young youth. These influencers have influenced um, TV shows that make billions of dollars. They have influenced movies that made billions of dollars, radio stations that made billions of dollars, fashion designers that has made billions of dollars, sneaker brands that made billions of dollars, commercials that have made billions of dollars off of black ignorance. What about relationship? When a young black woman looks on television and she's looking to find what she's attracted to, and when she sees the rap stars, these are the options of the men that she's looking at as these are the boys, or the boys who look like this in school are the boys that are my type. Whatever rapper she likes determines who will be her type. And if it's not the rapper, it's the ball player. If it's not the ball player, it's the TV show, soap opera, movie, film, what have you. Vice versa with the men. They look at the Cardi B's, they look at the Megan Thee Stallions, they look at all of these women and say, "This is what my wifey need to look like," not knowing that more than likely you wouldn't want to, if you knew the stuff that some of these sisters is doing that's in the industry, you wouldn't even hold your head up high holding their hands. And that's the reality of it. Okay. But the imagery, the billion-dollar industries has force fed this mentality to our youth. Billion-dollar industry. Another Q&A here. The question is, how is knowing Black history better for our youth than not knowing? This is a very easy question. Well, we have seen. Just think about it like this. Marcus Garvey once said, "A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, or culture is like a tree with no root." Now, think about a tree with no root. If a harsh windstorm comes, would I be, if I was a tree newly planted, mulched into the ground, would I survive that storm? If I was a tree deeply rooted in the soil, would I survive that storm? Absolutely, I would. So when Marcus Garvey was talking about a tree with no root, he's talking about that tree newly planted, mulched into the ground. Okay. They both can look beautiful. Both can be made to look beautiful. But the reality is, when adversity comes, which one is going to stand? The tree that's deeply rooted in the soil. So to know your history, period, not just for African Americans and African diasporans, for people to know African history, which is considered to be the origin of humanity, the origin of civilization. It's the foundation that connects all humanity, if that's the case. In fact, most of the African resources, no thriving nation today can survive without their exploitation of African resources. These are facts. Black ignorance is a billion-dollar industry. Okay. Is ancient Kemet Is the Bible a carbon copy of ancient Kemetic history? I'm going to say no. As a firm believer, I do not believe that it is a carbon copy of ancient of Kemetic history. Um, Even though there are things that are similar, there are a lot of stories that came before stories that are similar. So there are some similarities, but the scriptures even say there is nothing new under the sun. So some of the things that we think believe today are brand new, new technology, new what have you. Most of the stuff, the idea of these things existed before we had them come to pass. We have cars, they had chariots. The ideas of moving fast on wheels have always existed. Okay. Um, so we have cranes. They had some sort of ancient cranes. How do you think the pyramids were built? So these are things that we're learning. We have concrete. They had ancient concrete. So they're things that people used according to the environment that they were in that allowed them to use what they had to go further in the world that they lived in at that time. So, yes, absolutely. Absolutely not. I don't believe that at all. Okay. Do you believe Christianity is a white man's religion? Okay. So here we go again. No, I don't believe that. I believe if you do the history, you will find the story of the Ethiopian eunuch. You will find several references to Simon of Cyrene, who carried Jesus' torture stake. You will see references to the Ethiopians and the Egyptians in the Old Testament and the Canaanites. And, there's many references to Africans and Afro-Asiatics in the Bible. You just have to thoroughly do the research. Also, there were African nations such as King Azana of Abyssinia, of Aksum, who embraced the in Christianity in the fourth century. Okay, and in fact, one of the first Christian churches is still found in Ethiopia. It's a fourth century Christian church. So this is for the before the King James version of the Bible even existed. Okay, um, was it used to oppress people to an extent? I know that wars were definitely fought um, off the basis of some sort of Christian belief. I don't believe it was the accurate Christian belief because Jesus did not come with the thought of warfare at that time. Otherwise, he would have brought together an army to go against the Roman army to free the Jews at that time, but he did not do that. Okay, so this is not the Christian way. But unfortunately, you do have people who take certain things and run with it. There are many stories, even of Africans who were taken in the transatlantic slave trade, who already knew about Christ, okay, who already knew about the Bible. Some of the oldest Bible, the Coptic Museum today, goes way further back than the King James Bible. Okay, so same thing with the Ethiopian Bible, goes further back than the King James. So it's proof. There was a Congolese nation that accepted Christianity, one of the Congolese kings, before colonization of the African continent. So I believe when the gospel started to be spread, it was by the nation of Israel. They spread it in all parts of the earth. They went to different parts of the earth and they spread it. The Apostle Paul and the great evangelizers of the first century Christians were the ones who spread it. And by the way, they were not white people. Okay. Is it possible for Egyptians to be something other than African? The ancient Egyptians were African people, but let's not get this twisted. There were other cultures, people from different regions that came into this mega civilization, many periods and many waves of time. When you think about ancient Egypt as its height, the time where the Bible defines it as famine throughout the entire world. So everyone was coming to this rich, wealthy land at this time, okay? And they were coming to this land to find, you know, help at that time, okay? Find refuge. This was a mega civilization. It's just like the United States today. People leave their country and they come to the United States searching for refuge, searching for opportunity. That was Egypt at the time. So you had Asiatics, you had Indo-Europeans who came into Egypt, okay? But the predominant race at that time in Egypt were Black Africans, the original Egyptian people. So did the culture begin to mix over time? Yes, it definitely did. But it doesn't negate the fact that the original ancient Egyptian people were Black Africans. Okay, and we've seen this on the walls of hieroglyph temples, uh, underground tombs that have been found excavated. We've seen this. We've seen the constant whitewashing of these hieroglyphs in order to make it look something other than African. And you must understand why this happened, because most of the people who came into excavating Egypt, they were tomb raiders searching for hidden treasure, and they were also coming from the perspective of biblical studies. So, when coming from the perspective of biblical studies, they could not allow the people who had been subjugated to slavery to see themselves as the original Egyptians who brought civilization to the world at that time. So they had to somehow suppress that. And this is why most of your Egyptologists are not black, with the exception of Dr. Sally Ann, Dr. Sally Ann Ashton. Shout out to her though, and shout out to Vanessa Danvise. But also, her name is Solange B. Ashby. So shout out to Solange Ashby. I interviewed her on the Culture Show some time ago, and it was a pleasure to have her on there. You can check that out on our channel, IBP Media, as well, where she talked about her struggle as an Egyptologist and being the only black Egyptologist. She's standing her ground, standing firm, doing wonderful things out there. I mentioned Dr. Sally Ann Ashton and Vanessa Davies, who have been great supporters of the Black African Egyptian movement to restore the true origins of Egypt. I interviewed both of those sisters, and they are phenomenal women as well, that are non-black but speak the truth. So shout out to you sisters as well. So yeah, please feel free to leave any further questions. Let me see if there's one more that I'll answer for you guys today. And as you guys know, I try to do 20 minutes and get up out of here. So let's see. Let's see here. When did Kemet become Egypt? This is a very good question. Um, Kemet means land of the blacks, right? And it became Egypt. It is a derivative of the word Agupatos. Agupatos comes from the original word Hikaputah, and I learned this from Kaba Kabane. Shout out to Brother Kaba Kabane, master teacher. Um, Hikaputah represents the waters that rose up from the hills, um, and they mistake they mistaken that word, and it derived into uh, it was further a gupatos to the Greeks. So that change to Egypt, which is a Latinized version of Aegyptos, came later, came after the Greeks. And then the region became called something different as it became more of a mixed society. And also, it's key to note that the Nile Valley was originally a very tropical region at its height. Now it's more desert. So, a lot of people who were the original people, they left Egypt because the land wasn't as good as it's not as good as it was at that time. It's not as fertile as it used to be. So, a lot of people left Egypt, went southward. Some went into the Sinai Peninsula. Some went into deeper parts of Africa. All right, so this is enough. Make sure you uh, go and check out www.aria.org. That is AAARIA.org. And if you have any questions, looking for any bookings on myself, Emmanuel Kulu, African historian, I am doing the Untold Golden Age of Africa tour. Any questions about being a part of that, feel free to email AAARIA.info@gmail.com, and we will get back with you if you would like to be a part of the tour, receive a 2-hour seminar of the Untold Golden Age of Africa coming to a university, college, high school near you. This is Emmanuel Kulu. I'm signing off. Thank you guys for listening. Have a wonderful night.